My husband showed off the $200,000 scar he'd bought for his mistress. I made him regret it. You won't believe what happened when I found out my husband had been buying a luxury car for his mistress with our savings. Imagine working late nights, building a future with someone, only to discover they've been betraying you in the worst way possible. I was heartbroken, furious, and I knew something had to change. Stay tuned to see how I turned the tables and took control of my life in the most unexpected way. I should have known something was off. Maybe it was the way Matt smiled that evening. A little too wide, a little too forced, but I didn't want to think about it. I had enough to deal with. Work was piling up, the deadlines were looming, and I was already tired from the long week. You're working late again? Matt's voice floated from the kitchen, sweet and almost concerned, but I could hear the insincerity in his tone. I rolled my eyes, masking the irritation bubbling underneath. Big deadlines this week, I said, trying to sound casual, like this was just another normal night. I wanted to believe that it was, I really did, but that feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. He poured himself a glass of wine, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching me from a distance like he was enjoying this little show he was putting on. You gotta take it easy, Maya. Life isn't just about work, you know. His words were coated in that fake concern I had come to recognize all too well. He took a slow sip of wine, his eyes twinkling as if he had nothing to worry about. And I sat there, staring at my laptop, trying to pretend like everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. For the past 6 months I'd been living a lie. No, not the kind of lie where everything seems perfect on the outside. No, mine was the kind where I pretended to be the loving wife, while quietly building a case against the man I thought I knew. How foolish I had been, how blind I had allowed myself to be. It all started with small things, insignificant little clues that at first I shrugged off. Late nights, meetings that didn't make sense, expensive charges on our credit card for restaurants I had never stepped foot in. And then it was the smell and unfamiliar perfume that clung to his clothes when he came home late. Too late. At first, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. But one night, as I was sorting through the mail, I saw it, a receipt for a down payment on a car. Not just any car, a luxury car. And it wasn't for me. I had never felt that sick to my stomach in my entire life. I confronted him, of course, but he was smooth, like he always was. It's just work perks, Maya, he had said with a smile, brushing it off, like I was being silly for even asking. You know how my clients like to celebrate. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him. But there was something in the way he avoided my eyes, in the way his words came out too quickly, that told me everything I needed to know. He was lying. I had to know for sure. So I started paying closer attention. Every little thing I noticed went into my mental file, adding up like pieces of a puzzle. And then came the real shocker. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using our joint savings to fund an entire lifestyle for her Chloe, his so-called client. Expensive dinners, shopping sprees, gifts, all of it paid for with money that was meant for us. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. Here I was, working late nights to secure our future, to make sure we had enough to retire comfortably, and he was draining our accounts to impress a woman who could probably care less about him. But instead of confronting him right away, I chose silence. I chose to watch. The anger built up slowly, like a pressure cooker ready to explode, but I couldn't act on it yet. Not until I had everything I needed. I sat there, night after night, pretending everything was fine while secretly putting together the pieces. I knew that if I wanted this to work, one had to be careful. I had to be strategic. So I started planning. I researched fraud reporting procedures, legal options, and even contacted repossession companies. Every search, every click, was like a little victory. Matt thought he was clever, didn't he? But he didn't realize that I had a plan of my own. I had been gathering evidence, silently watching him unravel. He had no idea. I played my part perfectly, acting the role of the supportive wife. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his business trips, Even pretended not to notice when he came home smelling like an overpriced cologne that wasn't for me. But behind the scenes, I was working. I was preparing for the moment I would bring him down. The first step was to report the fraud. I called the dealership and played it cool, acting like I was just asking for more details on the car. By the time I hung up, I had everything: dates, amounts, and proof that the car had been purchased using our joint funds, but only his name was on the papers. It was all I needed. I then called the bank, reporting a transaction I hadn't authorized. I told them I thought my account had been compromised. They flagged it, and an investigation was opened. Each step I took brought me closer to the truth, closer to the moment when I would take back control. In the weeks that followed, I stayed calm, biding my time. I smiled when he smiled, pretended to be interested in his stories, and acted like I didn't notice the little things, like how he kept checking his phone under the table, or how he'd whisper sweetly into it when he thought I wasn't looking. I even caught a glimpse of a text from Chloe. "Can't wait to see the surprise you promised me." That text burned into my mind, fueling my resolve. I wouldn't let him get away with this. Not this time. As our anniversary approached, I knew it was coming: Matt's grand gesture. He had it all planned out. A fancy dinner, a walk under the stars, and then he would present Chloe with the car. But I was ready. I had everything in place. The fraud report had been filed, the repossession team was on standby, and all I had to do now was wait. The power had shifted, and I could feel it. It was almost too easy to slip into the role of the loving wife again, to pretend like I didn't know the truth. But I did. I knew everything, and soon so would Matt. I wish I could say the moment everything fell into place was satisfying, but honestly, it wasn't. It was more like a slow burn. An unsettling realization that my life, everything I thought I knew, had been a lie. It was like standing in the middle of a field during a storm, knowing the tornado is coming but having no idea when it will hit. I couldn't take my eyes off Matt. He still had no idea I knew. That smug smile he wore, that fake sweetness when he'd walk through the door, still seemed genuine to him. But I was no longer fooled. I wasn't the naive woman who believed in our perfect little life anymore. I knew better. It was almost sickening how effortless he made it look. I had spent so many years pouring myself into this relationship, making sure he was happy, trying to be the perfect wife. But all the while he was out there, draining our bank account for a woman who didn't deserve a damn thing from him. And for what? So he could play pretend. Pretending to be some charming businessman, pretending to have it all together, while I, his wife, was kept in the dark. The nerve of it. He thought he could just sweep it all under the rug. But not this time. Not this time. The days seemed to drag on as I waited for the perfect moment. There were nights when I thought about confronting him, screaming at him, making him see what he'd done. But that would have been too easy. No, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I was smarter than that. I had a plan, and it was working. Little by little, I was putting the pieces together, collecting the evidence I would need to destroy him. It all started when I found the receipt for the car, that luxury car, the one he was planning to give Chloe as an anniversary gift, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. But the universe had other plans. I had accidentally stumbled upon it while organizing the mail. The moment I saw it, my stomach turned. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had to force myself to breathe, to calm down, to not let him see that I knew. But the truth was right there, in black and white. He was buying her a damn car with money that was supposed to be for us. The anger I felt wasn't just for the betrayal. It was for the disrespect, the complete disregard for me and what we had built, the audacity. And the worst part, he had the nerve to act like everything was fine, like he was still the loving husband. Every time he came home and kissed me on the cheek, every time he pretended to care about how my day went, I felt like I was suffocating. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me like this and still think I wouldn't notice? It was almost laughable, the way he thought he could keep playing me for a fool. So I did what any sensible woman would do. I started to watch him more closely. I paid attention to the small things, the little inconsistencies, the moments that didn't quite add up. When he'd talk about his business trips, I started to ask more questions. Where exactly was he going? Who was he meeting? What did they talk about? I could see the way he would hesitate, like he was trying to come up with some excuse that wouldn't sound too ridiculous. It wasn't hard to figure out. I dug deeper. I contacted the dealership where he had bought the car. I was careful, playing it off like I was just interested in the details of the transaction. I couldn't let on that I already knew. But once I got the information I needed, it all fell into place. The car had been bought with our joint funds, but the paperwork only had Matt's name on it. That was the key. I had proof now. Proof that he had used our money for something that wasn't even for us. For his mistress. The next step was easy. I called the bank. I made it sound like I was concerned about a potential fraud situation. I think my account has been compromised, I told them. There's a transaction I didn't authorize. And just like that, an investigation was opened. I was in control now. Every little move I made felt like a victory, a small piece of the puzzle falling into place. But as I sat there, watching Matt, watching him go about his day as if nothing had changed, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I had everything I needed. I had the proof. I had the investigation started. I had the car's history, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go wrong. What if he figured it out? What if he noticed the subtle changes in me? I told myself to be patient. I had to be patient. The plan was working, and I couldn't afford to mess it up now. Matt was still under the impression that I was the same naive woman he had been lying to for years. He had no idea that I was already 10 steps ahead of him. I played the role of the loving wife perfectly. I asked him how his day went. I laughed at his terrible jokes. I even made dinner for us like everything was normal. But inside, I was seething. It was almost too easy. Every time he came home with that smug look on his face, I wanted to slap it off. But I didn't. I didn't need to. I had something better than a slap. I had a plan, and I was going to watch him crumble. I didn't have to do anything rash. No, I was going to let him dig his own grave. The truth would come out. And when it did, he would have nowhere to hide. The more I watched him, the more I saw how careless he was. He'd leave his phone lying around, always checking it but never letting me see what was on it. He'd text Chloe, sending her messages that were so obviously meant to keep their little affair going. And when I caught a glimpse of one of the texts, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. "Can't wait to see the surprise you promised me," it said. The car, the one I was going to take away from him. It made my blood boil, but it also made my resolve stronger. I played along with his plan. He suggested we go to a fancy dinner to celebrate our anniversary, and, of course, I agreed. I could see the excitement in his eyes as he talked about the evening, but I knew what he was really excited for the moment he could give the car to Chloe, and his whole little charade would be complete. But not if I could help it. I had everything in place. The repossession team was on standby, ready to take the car the moment he left. He had no idea that his perfect little plan was about to fall apart. I could feel it in my gut. This was it. The moment everything would change. The moment I would finally take control. That night, as we got ready for the dinner, I couldn't help but smile to myself. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Matt was going to leave me for Chloe, but not before he lost everything. He had no idea that while he thought he was making plans for his future, I was planning for his downfall. I was going to make sure that his perfect little world came crashing down the minute he least expected it. The tables were about to turn, and he wouldn't know what hit him. And Maya, was finally going to take back what was mine. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. So, I had everything in place to expose him, but I wasn't sure how he'd react. What do you think he did when I confronted him? Was he going to beg for forgiveness, or did he try to manipulate his way out of it? Drop a comment below and let me know, do you think he'll get away with it? Or will the truth finally catch up to him? Comment #1 if you think he'll lie, or hashtag 2 if you think he'll come clean. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would plot her own revenge. But there I was, sitting in the same living room where I had shared so many happy moments with Matt, crafting a plan that would shake his world to its core. It felt surreal, almost like I was living in someone else's story. But in that moment, everything clicked. I wasn't just some wife who had been betrayed. I was a woman who was done being the victim. I was done pretending that everything was fine when, in reality, my life had been flipped upside down. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became if Matt wanted to play dirty, then I was going to show him what dirty really looked like. The key was to stay calm, to not let my emotions take over. I knew that if I acted too quickly, it would all fall apart. I couldn't rush this. It had to be perfect. So for the next few days, I put on the mask of the loving wife once more. Every day, I asked about his day, listened to his boring business stories, and laughed at his stupid jokes. All the while, I was meticulously preparing for the moment when everything would go down. The plan was already set in motion, and I had already done the groundwork. The fraud report had been filed, the bank had opened its investigation, and the car dealership had been contacted. All that was left was for Matt to play into my hands. He had no idea what was coming. I could see it in his eyes. The more I played along, the more confident he became. He thought he had won. He thought he had me right where he wanted me, sitting quietly while he carried on with his affair and his lies. But the truth was, I was playing him like a fiddle. I was waiting for the moment when everything would unfold. The moment when his carefully crafted world would come crashing down. And that moment, I knew, was coming sooner than he thought. The anniversary dinner was the perfect excuse, the perfect stage for everything to go down. He was so eager, so excited about it, like this was going to be the night he would seal his fate. He thought he was being romantic, trying to win me over with fancy dinners and overpriced wine, but I wasn't fooled. He had no idea that while he was planning his grand gesture for Chloe, I was planning the biggest surprise of all for him. I could see how his mood shifted as he kept checking his watch, getting more and more impatient, like he couldn't wait to be rid of me and get to her. It made me sick, but I couldn't let him know that. I had to keep playing my part. When the night finally arrived, I almost felt like I was in a movie. The way he strutted in, wearing that damn suit, carrying roses like he was some kind of hero. "Happy anniversary, babe," he said, flashing me that fake grin. The one I used to love but now couldn't stand. I smiled back, but my mind was racing. "Happy anniversary," I replied, keeping my voice steady. My smile perfectly practiced. If he noticed the stiffness in my demeanor, he didn't say anything. He was too busy looking at his phone, waiting for the message he was hoping would come. I knew exactly what he was looking for, the green light to go make his gift to Chloe. We had dinner at one of those fancy places he loved to take clients. I could tell he was putting on a show, trying to impress me, but I wasn't buying it. The wine was expensive, the dishes were pretentious, and the pianist was playing our song, a song that used to be special to us, but now it just felt hollow. I didn't care about any of it. Not anymore. I watched him closely, feeling like I was seeing him for the first time. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was just some stranger who had stolen my life, my trust, and now he was going to pay for it. As the night wore on, Matt kept looking at his phone. Every time it buzzed, he would quickly check it, trying to hide the excitement in his eyes. I knew it was Chloe texting him, waiting for him to come deliver her prize. I could feel the tension building in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. He was so focused on his plan that he didn't even notice how much I had taken control of the situation. I wasn't the one being left behind anymore. I wasn't the one who would get hurt. This time, it was going to be him. After dinner, he suggested we take a walk. It was such a cliché, like he thought he was still the romantic man I married. I played along, letting him lead me out of the restaurant and back to the car. I could see the excitement in his eyes, the look of a man who thought he was about to get away with everything. But he didn't know that I had already won. I wasn't the one who would be left in the dust. I was the one who had everything. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't even care about the car anymore. I didn't care about the money or the betrayal. What I cared about was making sure Matt knew that he couldn't just walk all over me. I was done being invisible. We got back to the car, and I watched him check his watch again, impatience growing on his face. He couldn't wait to get out of there, to go see Chloe and present her with the car. But he had no idea that when he left, he wasn't just leaving me behind, he was leaving everything behind. The repossession team was already on their way, and the car would be gone by the time he even realized it. I watched him leave, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. It was finally happening. His perfect little world was crumbling, and he didn't even know it. As soon as he was out the door, I checked my phone. The message from the detective popped up, repossession complete. Everything went as planned. My heart raced. The car was gone. He had lost. And now, it was only a matter of time before the rest of his world came crashing down. It was almost too easy. All I had to do was wait, and it would all fall into place. Matt had no idea what was about to hit him. He thought he was going to surprise Chloe with the car, but instead, he was going to find out that everything he had built, every lie he had told, was about to be exposed. And I couldn't wait to watch it all unfold. For once, I wasn't the one who was broken. For once, I was the one in control. As the days dragged on, the weight of what I was about to do hung over me like a dark cloud. I had everything in place, but something in the pit of my stomach kept gnawing at me. It wasn't fear. No, I had passed that point. It was more like the calm before a storm, that eerie stillness that makes your skin prickle with anticipation. I couldn't let myself second-guess the plan now, not when I was so close to taking everything back. The more I watched Matt, the more I realized how much he had underestimated me. He thought I didn't know. He thought I was still the same naive woman he could manipulate with a smile and a few sweet words. But the truth was, I had been watching him all along, listening carefully, piecing together the lies he had told me. And now, the time had come for him to face the consequences. It was almost laughable how he still didn't suspect anything. Every day, he came home, carrying the same smug grin, like I couldn't see through his act. He kept trying to play the perfect husband, but I wasn't fooled anymore. He'd tell me about his business trips, about the things he was doing for work, but his stories didn't add up. I knew where he was really going, who he was really meeting. Chloe, I'd seen the way he'd get that gleam in his eye whenever he spoke about her. It made me sick, honestly, but I wasn't going to let my disgust show. Not yet. I had to stay in control. I had to be patient. Each time I saw him checking his phone, the anticipation would build in my chest. He didn't know it, but I had already started digging. I had already started the wheels of my plan turning. I contacted the bank, filed a fraud report, and even called the dealership pretending to be concerned about the car he had bought for Chloe. It felt almost too easy, like he was handing me the evidence I needed on a silver platter. I had the car's purchase history, the bank records, and the proof that he had used our joint account without my consent. Everything was falling into place. And yet, the hardest part was still ahead of me. I had to make sure I timed everything just right. The last thing I wanted was to tip him off before I was ready. I spent those days pretending that everything was fine, pretending that I didn't know what was happening behind my back. I smiled at his jokes, asked about his day, and played the role of the loving wife, all while secretly counting down the days until I could turn the tables on him. Every time he would mention something about his surprise for Chloe, I'd bite my tongue. It took everything in me not to call him out on it right then and there, but I knew it would be a waste of energy. He didn't deserve my anger. He deserved to lose everything. And that's exactly what I was going to make happen. Matt had no idea what was coming. Every time he made one of his little comments about how much he loved me or how happy he was with our life, I could feel the rage simmering inside of me. It was almost like a joke to him. A sick, twisted joke. He thought he was getting away with it. He thought I was blind to what he was doing. But he had no idea that every single move he made was being watched. Every lie he told was being documented. I had been gathering everything I needed for months, and now it was time to strike. The night of our anniversary dinner couldn't come soon enough. I had been counting down the days, knowing that it was the perfect opportunity to set everything in motion. I knew exactly what he was planning. He had this whole romantic evening set up for Chloe, and I was just a placeholder in his little scheme. But that's the thing. He thought I didn't know. He thought he could just waltz in and out of our life with no consequences. But what he didn't realize was that he was walking right into my trap. When Matt walked in, all dressed up in his fancy suit, carrying roses like he was some kind of hero, I almost laughed. It wasn't even funny anymore. "Happy anniversary, babe," he said, flashing me that fake grin of his. I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Happy anniversary," I replied. I had to remind myself not to let him see how much I hated him in that moment. But as I stood there, watching him, I realized something important. He wasn't the one in control anymore. I was. The dinner was everything he thought it would be, a carefully curated evening with all the trimmings. Expensive wine, extravagant dishes, and a pianist playing our song. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of all the lies hanging between us. But I wasn't focused on the dinner. I wasn't focused on the music or the wine. I was focused on one thing and one thing only. The moment when everything would finally fall apart for him. The more he smiled, the more I wanted to scream. But I stayed calm. I had to. Every time he checked his phone, I could feel the storm inside me growing. The way his eyes would light up whenever he saw a new message from Chloe, it was sickening. But I didn't let it show. I kept my eyes on him, pretending that I didn't notice. It wasn't until he suggested that we take a walk after dinner that I knew it was almost time. He was itching to leave, to get to her, and I was more than happy to play along. As we walked back to the car, I could practically hear his thoughts racing. He was already planning his next move, how he was going to give Chloe the car, how he was going to impress her, how he was going to make her his. But what he didn't know was that the only thing I was planning was his downfall. The car, the one he thought was going to be his big gift to her, was already gone. It had been taken right out from under him, and he hadn't even seen it coming. When Matt left, I could feel the rush of adrenaline flooding my system. I knew exactly what was about to happen. The repossession team was on their way, and the car would be gone before he even had a chance to figure it out. It was almost too easy. I had everything in place. Every piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and all I had to do now was sit back and wait. The world he had carefully built for himself, the lies he had told, the money he had spent, it was all coming to an end, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I was so close. I could feel it in my bones, the final moments before everything came crashing down. The anticipation was a slow burn, winding tighter and tighter inside me, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I had to stay calm, stay in control. Matt had no idea what was coming. He thought he had the upper hand, that he had this whole thing figured out, but he didn't. He didn't know that I had already laid the perfect trap, and as much as I hated to admit it, I found myself enjoying the process. It was like watching a train wreck unfold, but in slow motion, knowing exactly how it was going to end. The days after I set the plan in motion felt like a blur. Matt was getting careless, and I knew it. He kept talking about the big surprise for Chloe, about how he couldn't wait to see her face when he gave her the car. Every time he said it, I had to fight the urge to slap him across the face. The audacity. But I didn't. I kept my cool, even when it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I knew he was sinking deeper and deeper into his own lies, thinking he was outsmarting me. But in reality, he was just digging his own grave, and I was standing there, watching him do it. It was hard to look at him sometimes, to see the man I had once trusted so completely, now a stranger to me. He was so caught up in his own web of deceit, so oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. The perfume on his clothes, the late nights that never made sense, the dinners he'd go on with Chloe while I stayed at home working. I saw it all, and now I had proof. The fraud report had been filed, the dealership had been contacted, the car was gone, and Matt had no clue. Every time he checked his phone, every time he looked at it with that sick excitement in his eyes, I felt a rush of satisfaction. He was so close to getting what he thought he wanted. But he didn't realize that what he was about to get was far worse. I had been playing this part for so long now that it almost felt like second nature. I pretended to be the happy wife, the supportive partner, even though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to confront him, to scream at him, to expose everything he had done. But I knew that wasn't the way. Not yet. I had learned long ago that patience was the key, that waiting for the right moment could make all the difference. And the right moment was coming fast. It came in the form of our anniversary dinner, the perfect cover. He thought it was just another night for us to pretend, another night for him to play the loving husband while he secretly planned his future with Chloe. He had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead of him. He still thought I was the same naive woman he could easily manipulate. He couldn't have been more wrong. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't just a victim in this story. I was the one who was going to come out on top. And watching him so confidently play out his little charade only made me more certain of it. The dinner was a joke. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a celebration. It was just another one of his attempts to buy my silence, to buy my ignorance. But I wasn't buying it. The wine was expensive. The food was too fancy. And the pianist playing our song? It felt like a slap in the face. He was pretending like he was the man I married, the man who cared. But I saw through it. I saw through every word he spoke, every gesture he made. He thought I didn't know, but I knew. I knew about the car. I knew about Chloe. I knew about everything. And the worst part? He thought it didn't matter. He thought that by buying her the car, he was somehow winning, somehow making up for the fact that he had been a terrible husband. But what he didn't realize was that the only thing he was doing was digging himself deeper into a hole he could never climb out of. I watched him closely throughout the evening, watched the way his eyes kept flicking to his phone, the way he'd smile when a message came through. It was sickening to think that he was so comfortable, so confident, knowing he was lying to me every second of the day. But I wasn't going to let it go on any longer. I had a plan, and it was working. He suggested we take a walk after dinner. I could tell he was eager to get out of there, eager to get to Chloe, to give her the gift he thought would seal the deal. But I wasn't about to let him have that. I wasn't about to let him walk away from this unscathed. So I played along. I walked beside him, pretending like everything was fine, pretending like I didn't know what he had planned. It was almost too easy. I let him think he was getting away with it. But I wasn't the one being left behind this time. He was. The walk was short, but it felt like the longest one of my life. Every step, every moment felt like the calm before the storm. When we finally made it to the car, I saw the excitement in his eyes. He couldn't wait to get away. But he didn't know that the moment he stepped out of that car, he was going to lose everything. The repossession team was already on their way. The car was gone. And by the time he figured it out, it would be too late. I didn't let him see the satisfaction on my face as I waved him goodbye. I didn't let him see the smug smile I wanted to wear as I knew he was walking right into my trap. I couldn't wait to see his reaction when he realized everything he had planned, everything he thought he was getting away with, was falling apart. It was almost like I was in control of the whole situation, like I was holding the strings and he was the puppet, and I was loving every second of it. I waited for the text, the message from the detective. Repossession complete. Everything went as planned. The moment I saw that, I felt a rush of relief, of triumph. The car was gone. He had lost. I had won. And there was nothing he could do to change it now. I could feel my heart racing, the adrenaline building up inside me as I waited. The plan had been set in motion, the wheels were turning, and there was no turning back now. I watched Matt trying to act calm, trying to act like the man he used to be, but everything about him felt foreign to me. He was still my husband, but he wasn't the man I thought I married. He wasn't the man who loved me, who promised to be faithful. No, he was just a stranger, someone I didn't even recognize anymore. And the worst part? He had no idea how close he was to losing everything. He had no idea that his entire world was about to come crashing down, and I was the one holding the match. The more I watched him, the more I realized how deep he had fallen into his own lies. The way he'd smile at me, kiss me on the cheek, and act like everything was normal, all while carrying on an affair behind my back. He was living in a fantasy world, and he didn't even see it. I could see how much he was enjoying playing the part of the loving husband, all the while planning his big surprise for Chloe. He thought he was getting away with it, but he didn't know that I had been one step ahead of him the entire time. I played along with it all, of course. I had to. I couldn't risk letting him know what I knew. He had to think everything was fine until it was too late. Every time he mentioned Chloe, every time he talked about their special plans, I wanted to scream at him. How dare he treat me like this? But I didn't. I smiled, I laughed, I pretended that nothing was wrong, because I knew exactly what was going on, and I was just waiting for the moment when I could strike. And now, the moment was here. Matt had no idea that when he walked out that door that night, he wouldn't just be leaving me behind. He wouldn't be going to surprise Chloe with that damn car. No, he was walking into a trap I had set for him, one that he never saw coming. The repossession team was already on their way. The car that he thought was the grand gesture, the symbol of his lies and deceit, was already gone. And the best part? He had no clue. He didn't know that when he thought he was giving Chloe everything, he was actually losing it all. I could see it in his eyes as he checked his phone, his excitement building, knowing that soon he'd be able to play the part of the perfect man for Chloe. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not after everything he'd done. He thought he could buy her love, buy her loyalty, all while draining our savings, all while sneaking around behind my back. Well, now it was my turn. Now it was my turn to make him pay for everything he had done. When we walked out of the restaurant, I could feel the tension in the air. He was practically vibrating with excitement, his mind already on the car, already planning how he would present it to her. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about how easy it was to manipulate him, how easy it was to make him believe that he was in control, when in reality, I was the one holding the cards. Every step we took felt like a countdown, each moment drawing us closer to the inevitable. As we walked to the car, one couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had been planning this for so long, watching, waiting for the right moment, and now it was all about to come to fruition. The car, the one he thought would fix everything, the one he thought would show Chloe how much he cared, was gone, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He could have everything he wanted in the world, but he would never be able to fix the one thing that mattered: his betrayal, his lies. When he left to meet Chloe, it was like everything slowed down. I knew what was happening. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. I could see it in my mind, Matt pulling up to Chloe's place, all excited, ready to show her the car, ready to watch her face light up when she saw it. But instead, it was going to be the repossession team waiting for him. The car was gone, and in that moment, he was going to realize that all his efforts, all his manipulation, had been for nothing. He had lost, and I was the one who had won. I stood there watching him go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. I couldn't wait to see his face when he found out. I couldn't wait for the moment when everything came crashing down around him. And then the message I had been waiting for came through. The detective's text, confirming that the car had been repossessed. I felt my heart race with excitement. It was over. He had lost. And I had won. It was almost too easy. It was almost like Matt had handed me the victory on a silver platter. He thought he was so clever, so smooth, but he had no idea how much I had been planning behind the scenes. Every lie, every betrayal had led me to this moment. And now, the truth was going to come out. He was going to have to face the consequences of his actions, and I was going to be the one to make sure that happened. When Matt returned that night, I could see the confusion in his eyes. He wasn't angry, not yet, but the tension was building. He could feel it. Something was wrong. I didn't have to say a word. I just watched as he tried to make sense of it all, his world slowly beginning to unravel. He didn't know it yet, but everything he had worked so hard to build was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The satisfaction of knowing I was in control, that I had taken back my power, was overwhelming. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had won. I wasn't the one left in the dust. I wasn't the one who had been betrayed and humiliated. No, this time it was Matt. This time it was his turn to lose everything, and I was going to make sure of it. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. As I watched Matt step out the door, his face flushed with excitement, my heart was pounding in my chest. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He was so wrapped up in his own little world, so consumed with the idea of impressing Chloe, that he had no clue the ground beneath him was about to crumble. He thought he was going to surprise her with the car, that fancy, shiny gift he had purchased with our joint funds, believing it would win her over, make her see him as the perfect man. But what he didn't know was that the only thing that was going to happen was that his entire world would come crashing down, and I would be there to watch it unfold. I stood still in the doorway, pretending to be the same woman who had been devastated by his betrayal, the same woman who had cried herself to sleep at night, wondering where it all went wrong. But that woman was gone. The moment I decided to take control, to stop being the victim, everything changed. The rage that had been building up inside of me for months had turned into something far more powerful: strength, clarity, and the desire for justice. I was no longer the broken wife. I was the one who had all the power, all the control. And as Matt walked away, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. It was like everything was finally in its place. This was it. This was the moment I had planned for, the moment that would be the end of his game and the beginning of my freedom. I couldn't stop the smile that tugged at my lips as I watched him drive off. He was so sure of himself, so confident that his plans would work. He thought he could just walk out of our marriage, go straight to Chloe, and present her with the car he had so lovingly bought, as if that would make up for everything. But the truth was, he had already lost. The car was gone, and as he pulled away, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I had won. I didn't have to wait long for the message to come through. It was the text I had been waiting for, the one that confirmed everything I had worked for. Repossession complete. Everything went as planned. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I just stood there, taking it all in. It was over. He had no idea, but he would soon find out. The car that he thought was his big gift to Chloe, the car that he believed would make everything okay, was gone. And just like that, his perfect little plan had been destroyed. It felt almost too easy. The satisfaction that flooded through me was so intense that I almost couldn't believe it. He had been so careless, so confident, that he had walked right into my trap, and now there was no escape for him. I didn't waste any time. I needed to make sure that the next part of my plan went smoothly. I couldn't afford to let my emotions take over now. I had waited too long for this moment, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. I made sure everything was in place: lawyers, investigators, and the evidence hide behind her perfect little facade any longer. And for the first time in years, I felt something like power rushing through me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the invisible one in the family. I wasn't the one who had to silently bear the weight of everyone else's expectations and lies. The truth had been exposed, and there was no way for her to spin it, no way for her to twist the story to make herself the hero again. This time, I was the one holding the reins. I took a step toward her, my voice steady despite the wild storm raging inside me. "You don't get to play the victim anymore, Evelyn," I said, my words cutting through the tense air like a knife. "You've been manipulating everyone, including Mom and Dad, for months. You've let them think I didn't care, that I was too busy with my own life to help. You've let them believe I was the one who was selfish. But the truth is, it's always been me. I've been the one doing everything, and you've been sitting back, letting everyone praise you for it." Her eyes flicked nervously between me and the rest of the family, her confident posture slipping. I could see the cracks starting to form in her composure, and it felt like a small victory. I wasn't just exposing the truth, I was making her face the consequences of her actions. And for once, I didn't feel bad about it. She deserved to face the truth. "You've always been the good daughter, haven't you?" I continued, my voice hardening with every word. "You've been the one everyone turns to, the one they rely on. But what happens when the truth comes out, Evelyn? What happens when they find out that all along you've been stealing my credit, taking my help, and letting me be the bad guy?" I saw her flinch. It was only for a second, but it was enough. She didn't know how to defend herself anymore. She couldn't. The lies she had built up over the years were falling apart at her feet, and she knew there was no escaping it. "You've been sitting there acting like the perfect daughter while I've been the one making all the sacrifices," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I've been the one giving up my time, my money, my energy, but none of that mattered to you, did it? You just let them believe it was all you," while I quietly disappeared into the background. I could see my parents' faces, their eyes wide with shock. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for my father's arm, as if she was trying to find some kind of anchor in the storm. I could hear their breathing change, the tension in the room thick enough to suffocate anyone who tried to speak. But this wasn't just about them. It wasn't just about what they believed. It was about me finally standing up for myself. "I've been sending them money every month, Evelyn," I said, the words feeling like they were coming from someone else, someone stronger, someone who wasn't afraid anymore. "And you knew it? You knew I was doing it. But you didn't care, did you? You didn't care because you were too busy trying to make everyone think you were the one holding everything together. You were too busy pretending to be the hero." She shook her head, her face flushing with frustration. "I've been helping too," she said, her voice cracking under the pressure. "I didn't ask for all of this. You're the one who's making this into something it's not." I could feel the heat rise in my chest, but I held my ground. I wasn't going to let her twist this. "You're right, Evelyn," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've been playing the perfect daughter, taking credit for everything I've done while I sat in silence, letting you make me feel invisible." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "But not anymore. The truth is out, and there's no going back." I turned to my parents, who were still standing there, caught in the middle of everything. I could see the guilt on their faces, the disbelief, but also something else. Regret. They hadn't seen it before. They hadn't understood. And maybe it was too late for them to truly make up for it. Maybe they would never fully understand the years of resentment and hurt that had built up because of Evelyn's manipulation. But they had to know now. They had to see it. "Mom, Dad, this is what's been happening," I said, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. "I've been the one helping, the one giving, the one who's been there when you needed me, not her. She's been lying to you. She's been taking the credit, and you've let her. You've let her control the story, and I've just stood here, taking it. But I'm done." I could see my father's face soften as he processed my words. The weight of the situation was finally starting to hit him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him really see me. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. I turned back to Evelyn, who was standing there, visibly shaken now, her defiance slowly crumbling. She tried to speak, but her words caught in her throat. She was done. She couldn't defend herself anymore. The truth had exposed everything she had tried so hard to hide. And in that moment, I realized something I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to admit she was wrong. I had taken back control, and that was enough. I could feel the tears stinging my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Not when I had finally found my voice. This wasn't about me getting revenge. It wasn't about me making her feel the way she had made me feel for years. It was about standing up for myself, for the first time in my life. It was about showing everyone, including myself, that I was worthy of being seen, that my sacrifices and my love for this family mattered. Evelyn's facade had cracked, and there was nothing she could do to put it back together. The truth had been exposed, and no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, no matter how much she tried to make herself the victim, I knew that from this point forward, things would never be the same. And I was okay with that, because for the first time, I wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. I wasn't the one being overlooked. I was finally standing in the light. The silence in the room felt like it was suffocating me. Every second stretched on endlessly as I waited for Evelyn to say something, anything to justify the lies she'd been spinning for months. But there was nothing. No words, no defense, just the tense, palpable quiet hanging in the air. I could feel the weight of everything, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment I'd spent trying to keep our family afloat while she basked in praise. For so long, I had been the invisible one, the one who did everything without a word of thanks, while Evelyn played the part of the perfect daughter. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I could feel my pulse thumping in my ears, and for a moment, I wondered if I was shaking from the adrenaline or the raw emotion that had been building up inside me for years. This was the moment, the one where everything came crashing down, where I took back the control I had so long given away. The moment where Evelyn couldn't hide behind her sweet smile and clever manipulation anymore. I wasn't just exposing her lies. I was taking back my place in this family, and no matter how hard she tried to worm her way out of it, I wasn't backing down. Evelyn stood there, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, trying to look unfazed, but I could see the subtle shifts in her posture. Her usual confidence was starting to crack. She couldn't hide behind her perfect act anymore, and I couldn't help but feel a little satisfaction in knowing that. I wasn't going to let her continue this charade. Not after everything. "You think you can keep playing this game, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I was done being the quiet one. Done being the one who silently watched as she manipulated everyone around her. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't the invisible one in the background. And I wasn't going to let her make me feel that way again. "I don't need to play games, Quinn," Evelyn shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But there was something in her eyes now, something that betrayed her cool exterior. For a brief moment, I saw panic, a flicker of doubt, and in that moment, I knew I had her. "You've been doing it for months," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You've been pretending to be the one doing everything while I quietly supported Mom and Dad. I've been sending money every month since July. And you?" I pointed directly at her, watching as she flinched. "You took credit for all of it. You let them believe it was you, while I quietly took the back seat, just so you could wear your crown as the good daughter." She stepped back, her face reddening. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, as if the words had failed her. For a brief moment, I felt something strange stir inside me, a brief sense of triumph, of vindication. But it didn't last long. The truth had finally come out. But what would happen now? Would it be enough to make her feel the weight of her deceit? Would she finally admit what she'd done? Or would she try to talk her way out of it like she always did? I wasn't waiting around to find out. I wasn't going to let her twist this anymore. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Evelyn," I said, my voice rising with each word. "I'm done with you getting away with everything while I'm the one who gets overlooked. You made me feel invisible for so long. Let everyone believe I was the selfish one when, in reality, I was the one making the hard choices. I was the one cutting back. I was the one sacrificing. And you sat there, letting them believe you were the one holding everything together. You were never the one doing the work, you were the one reaping the rewards. I could feel the heat building in my chest, but this time, I didn't care. This time, I wasn't going to back down. She had made me feel small for so long. She had made me feel like I didn't matter, but not anymore. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked sister anymore. I was done with her lies, and I was done with my parents enabling them. You've been lying to them, Evelyn, lying to me. And I'm done letting you get away with it, I continued, my voice steady, even though I felt like I was ready to burst. You've made me feel like I didn't matter, like my sacrifices didn't matter. But it was me, it was always me, and now you can't hide from that. The truth's out, and no matter how much you try to twist it, it doesn't change a damn thing. Evelyn looked like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time, I could see the cracks in her carefully constructed world. The perfect daughter, the perfect sister, everything she had built her identity on was starting to crumble. And I wasn't sorry for it. You really thought you could get away with this forever, didn't you? I asked, my voice still calm but cold, like ice. You thought you could keep playing everyone, keep making me the villain while you took all the credit. Well, not anymore. Not this time. The air in the room felt thick with tension, so heavy I could barely breathe. My parents were still standing there, silent, taking it all in. I could feel their eyes on me, could sense their hesitation, the guilt, the regret. They were there, but they weren't ready to admit it yet. Not yet. But I wasn't waiting for them to apologize. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had stood up for myself. I had exposed the truth, and that was enough. Evelyn was standing there, her face pale, her expression faltering. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything she had put me through, the lies, the manipulation, the way she had always been able to twist everything to make herself the center of attention. No, I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I don't need you to apologize, I said quietly, my voice unwavering. I don't need you to admit anything. What I need is for you to understand that I am done being invisible. I'm done being the one who gets overlooked. I'm done with you controlling the narrative. The truth is out. And no matter how much you want to lie, you can't change it. I turned away from her then, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply this had affected me. I had said my piece. I had done what I needed to do. Now it was up to everyone else to make their choices. The family I had tried so hard to please, the family that had always made me feel small, now they had to decide. They had to choose whether they were going to see me for who I really was, or whether they were going to continue living in the fantasy that Evelyn had built. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of finality. The tension that had been building up for so long was finally released, and I could feel the weight of it lifting off my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer going to be the one who silently took the back seat. The truth was out, and now, no matter what, I had finally found my voice. The house felt different when I walked back inside. The usual warmth and familiarity of it had been replaced by something colder and uncomfortable tension that clung to every corner, every piece of furniture, and every word left unspoken. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, heavy with guilt, regret, and maybe even a little fear. But nothing could undo what had just happened. The truth had come out, and I wasn't sure what came next. I wasn't sure if anything would ever feel the same again. I stood there, at the threshold of the living room, my heart still pounding from the confrontation with Evelyn. My body was shaking, but it wasn't just from anger anymore. It was from the overwhelming feeling of release, the sudden freedom that came with finally standing up for myself. For once, I wasn't the quiet, overlooked daughter. I wasn't the one who silently carried the burden. No, I was the one who had spoken the truth, who had exposed the lies, and who had finally let everyone see what I had been through. And for the first time, it felt like they were seeing me. My mother sat in her favorite armchair, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes were red from crying. But it wasn't just the tears that gave her that look, it was the disappointment. The realization that she had allowed this to go on for so long. I saw it in the way she wouldn't meet my gaze, in the way she kept fidgeting with the hem of her sweater like it could somehow shield her from the truth. And then there was my father, standing by the window, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was just staring out into the dark night, his face a mask of confusion and regret. I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't know what to feel. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth to them, trying to be seen, trying to be heard, only to watch Evelyn get all the praise and attention while I was left in her shadow. I wanted them to apologize. I wanted them to say that they had been wrong, that they had seen what I had been doing all along. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Words couldn't erase years of being overlooked, of being treated like I was invisible. Quinn, my father's voice broke the silence, rough and unsure. It was the first time he had spoken since we returned home. He cleared his throat and glanced over at my mother. I don't know what to say. We've made a mistake, a huge mistake. And I can't. He paused again, running a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. I should have listened to you. I should have seen it. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Part of me wanted to run away from all of it. Part of me just wanted to walk out that door and never come back. But I didn't. I stood there, my back straight, my feet planted firmly on the ground. I wasn't running anymore. Not from them, not from my own family. I don't need an apology, I said, my voice quieter than I expected, but still firm. I don't need you to tell me you were wrong. What I need is for you to see me. For the first time, really see me. See the sacrifices I've made. See everything I've done. All the ways I've tried to help, to keep this family together. You never saw it. You never saw me. And that's what hurt the most. My mother looked up at me, her face crumpling in a way that made my heart ache. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with so many emotions I couldn't even begin to process them all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice small, barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Quinn. The words were shaky, like she had to force them out, but they still hit me like a punch to the gut. I should have listened to you. I should have seen what you were doing, but I didn't. I let myself believe what was easiest, what was comfortable. I let Evelyn. I let her take the credit because I wanted to believe she was doing it all. I'm sorry. I failed you. Her apology felt like it was too little, too late, and yet, in some strange way, it was all I needed. Not because I was ready to forgive her, but because for the first time I heard her say it. I heard her admit the truth. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. It was a crack in the wall that had been built between us, a crack that could maybe one day become a door to something better. I glanced at Evelyn, who had remained silent the whole time, standing off to the side like she was afraid to make eye contact. Her face was a mixture of embarrassment and anger, but mostly, it was the look of someone who had been caught, who had nowhere to hide anymore. I had taken away her power, and for that, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not for exposing her, but for exposing myself. For finally standing up for the person I had been, for the person I was still becoming. I turned back to my parents, both of them still looking at me with those haunted expressions. They didn't know what to say next. How could they? They had spent so many years ignoring me, pushing me aside, assuming I was the one who didn't care. How could they possibly make up for that? But in that moment, I knew something else. I didn't need them to fix it. I didn't need their validation or their apology to feel whole. I had finally found my voice, and that was enough. I'm done with the past, I said, my voice steady now, stronger than it had ever been. I'm done with letting anyone, especially you, make me feel like I'm not enough. You didn't see me before? but that doesn't mean I'm going to keep waiting for you to catch up. I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back. It was a difficult thing to say, to leave behind all the years of longing, of hoping for something I couldn't control. But it was also freeing. It was like taking a deep breath after holding it in for far too long. I wasn't going to be anyone's afterthought anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone take my worth from me. The room was still quiet, heavy with the weight of everything that had been said. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't afraid to be heard. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth, even if it made everyone uncomfortable. I had finally found the strength to stand on my own, to step out of Evelyn's shadow and into the light. And that was the most powerful thing I could do. For myself, for my future, for the person I knew I was becoming. I looked at my parents one last time, and though the pain of the past would take time to heal, I felt something shifting between us. I wasn't asking for anything from them anymore. I had already given myself what I needed. The rest was just a bonus. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. This time, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking toward me, toward my future, toward a new beginning. It all came down to one final moment. The truth was out, but was it enough to change everything? You're not going to believe what happened next. It's the twist that will leave you speechless. After all the lies, all the years of being ignored, was I finally going to get the recognition I deserved? You'll have to see for yourself. But here's the big question. After everything that happened, would you be able to forgive the ones who hurt you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This story isn't over, and I need to hear from you. The lesson I learned is simple. Don't let anyone take your voice or make you feel small. In a world that constantly tries to put us in boxes, it's easy to fade into the background and let others take credit for what we've done. But we deserve to be seen, to be heard. Don't wait for validation from others. Stand up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Your worth isn't defined by anyone's approval, it's defined by you. Speak your truth, take your place, and never apologize for owning who you are. Life's too short to be invisible.